sitting of this 5th Joint Select Committee on National Security as we engage this afternoon for this public hearing in respect of our inquiry entitled Strategies to Combat the Prevalence of Organized Criminal Gangs in Trinidad and Tobago, with a special focus on measures implemented to identify vulnerable youth and to intervene early. Let me take this opportunity to welcome each and every one of you to this public hearing. Might I advise that this meeting is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. May I take the opportunity to specifically welcome the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Gary Griffith, and his team, who will in a moment introduce themselves, and of course, as well, welcome the staff and the representatives of the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs, to this meeting. So, in the circumstances, I would now like to introduce myself as chairman of this committee and chairman of these proceedings. I am Fitzgerald Estelbert Hines, member of this committee and its chairman. Let me ask my other colleagues to introduce themselves in turn, starting, of course, with Mr. De Freitas.
Good afternoon and welcome, Member De Freitas.
Good afternoon, Paul Richards, Vice Chair.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ayana Webster-Roy, Member.
Good afternoon, Keith Scotland, Member.
Good afternoon, Jayanti Lachmidial, Member.
Good afternoon, I am Randall Mitchell, Member.
Who will join us very shortly. So let me begin with the Police Commissioner and his team. We'd be happy if you would, for our benefit and the record, introduce yourselves. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Gary Griffith, Commissioner of Police, here. I have here with me my extreme left with Corporal Fraser from the SIU. Next to him is the Superintendent in charge of the Agency Task Force, the ITF, and the Superintendent Sparrow. To my right, immediately next to me, Sergeant Small from the Police City, also from the Central Division. Next to him, the Superintendent of Negotiations, Superintendent Grant. And finally, the Superintendent for the Special Victims Department, Leader specifically Gender-Based Violence, Superintendent Claire Guy Allen. So,
Chairman, excuse me, I think the audio is a bit low. I don't know if the introductions were well heard. Please, Chair.
Madam Clerk, they were not well heard. I did not hear the Commissioner cleanly at all.
Now?
Yes, I think it's a little improved, Commissioner. Shall we run it again? I'm sorry.
Okay, sure, sir. Okay, again, Gary Griffith, Commissioner of Police. As I go around here, we have 5 members of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that will be accompanying me today in this venture from departments of the Community Relations, the SIU, and the IATF, as well as the Gender-Based Violence Unit. So when you look to my left, starting at the end there, we'll have Corporal Fraser from the SIU. Next to him, on my immediate left, would be the Superintendent in command of the Interagency Task Force, the IATF, Superintendent Subero. As we go to my extreme right, I have Sergeant Small from Community Relations, involved in community policing. Next to him, the Superintendent in command of Community Relations, Superintendent Ram Kilawan. And finally, the Superintendent of the Special Victims Unit, and also the Gender-Based Violence Unit, Superintendent Claire Guy Allen, sir.
Let us take the opportunity to ask the representatives of the Office of the Prime Minister and Gender Affairs Unit Gender Affairs to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Jacqueline Johnson, Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for gender and child affairs. Mr. Moses?
Certainly. Good day, everyone. My name is Bertrand de Moses. I'm the Coordinator of Child Affairs at the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all. As I indicated earlier, this inquiry is entitled 1, to determine the strategies to combat the prevalence of organized criminal gangs in Trinidad and Tobago, with a special focus on measures implemented to identify vulnerable youth and to make early interventions to prevent them from going in the wrong path. The objectives of this inquiry is and includes to understand the strategies adopted by the national security agencies in Trinidad and Tobago to combat the prevalence of organized criminal gangs. Secondly, to understand the specific measures implemented to identify vulnerable youth and intervene prior to possible gang recruitment. 3, to investigate whether the current criminal justice system, including time spent in pretrial detention for some, aids in gang recruitment in any way or ways, and as well to investigate the progress made towards the transformation of the prison system from a punitive model to a rehabilitative and restorative justice model. A suite of legislation was introduced within recent times in the Parliament between 2015 and 2020 with the objective of addressing some of the persistent issues surrounding crime prevention and designed to improve the criminal justice system in Trinidad and Tobago. Some of these legislative efforts, not exhaustively, but include measures to deal with anti-gang. Well, of course, recently that law fell into oblivion. Proceeds of crime, bail restrictions for certain crimes, pre-trial proceedings, trial by a judge alone. Whistleblowing legislation was introduced, but yet to be passed and enacted. And I can share with you, during a debate in the House of Representatives on Friday, the 20th of November, 2020, the Attorney General maintained that armed with the relevant legislation, the national security agencies were successful at reducing the number of organized criminal gangs in Trinidad and Tobago from 211 to 129 over the period 2018 to 2020, with a reduction from 2,400 members to about 1,014. This was a statistic shared by the Attorney General. While this reduction is commendable and hopefully sustained and sustainable, the proliferation of gangs remain a burning issue and a threatening issue to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It is against this backdrop, and given its mandate, this Joint Select Committee on National Security has chosen to interrogate the data that supports the creditable reduction in gangs over the period, as I demonstrated a while ago, and to find out what are the strategies used, including the legislative tools, if applicable, that work to bring about this success and hopefully to continue on that trajectory. We are about to interrogate as well the data that supports the corresponding reduction in crime, and we would like to know what additional strategies are proposed to further reduce the prevalence of gangs in all communities, and what targets have been set for the elimination of gangs in Trinidad and Tobago. Because I would like to say on behalf of the committee and the Parliament by extension, notwithstanding all that we say we have done, notwithstanding all that we actually have done, it is within the last few hours in this country that the public really became very emotively riled up on a state of affairs that in their minds, based on the little information they have, was caused by the work of a team of persons who came together to perpetrate a very horrific crime or crimes that led to this painful explosion of emotions in Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, these, generally speaking, our guests here today, the Office of the Prime Minister and the Office of the Commissioner of Police, led by the Commissioner, you all are the first who will appear before us today, but all stakeholders, including the judiciary, will be asked to provide us with information along the lines of the interrogation that we now pursue. In which case, I would like to begin by asking you, Commissioner, we are all in the room, so we will move from the police to the Office of the Prime Minister seamlessly in questions, and we expect answers from all of you in the room here with us. So I would like to give you, Commissioner, an opportunity to make a few opening remarks on behalf of your police service and your team here today as we proceed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, as brief as possible, because the individuals I have here is a diversity of the systems that will be used by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to deal with this subject of the hearing, that being strategies to combat the concerns of organized criminal gangs, specifically with specific focus on the vulnerable youth. Mr. Chairman, and to other members of the JSC, I can show the concept of this, the police and the involvement of the police via criminology, the theory of criminology in crime prevention, where it can be categorized in three different aspects of crime prevention: primary, secondary, and tertiary. All three, there's police involvement to assist in the reduction of such crime, especially for vulnerable youth. The primary involves what many persons would perceive as the sole or the major factor of policing, but it's a big part to play to reduce the problem with organized crime. And that has to do with high visibility, law enforcement, target hardening, a deterrent. And that aspect, we'll see much more involved with the IATF, providing the operational capability to suppress gangs and to make life difficult for them to act in the way they do, and also the intelligence gathering that we will get from the SIU. That is the reason why both of them are here today. So that concept to JSC, we push back heavily to make life difficult for persons to indulge in that type of activity. That is the consequence. So that you must provide the deterrent and to ensure that there are consequences. Because of the heavy degree of intelligence we have acquired over the last few years, we have utilized that intelligence, not just from the SIU, but because the Minister of National Security has now reignited that concept of the National Operation Fusion Center, where we're able to get good intelligence, not just from the police arms, but also from the Defense Force and other intelligence agencies, inclusive of the SSA. We can use that intelligence to know how to take clinical operations to suppress gangs, especially in specific areas, where the IATF will now get involved. That, to the JSC, proved to be very effective. The data showed stated by the Attorney General, it's almost in sync with what we have here. So there has been a reduction because we've had deterrent and there was heavy policing. Unfortunately, we do see a concern in the very near future because one of the things that would have caused the support of this, again, goes now to tertiary crime prevention, that being the criminal justice system. The anti-gang legislation was very critical to provide us with that type of that strength and the tools to give us that, to put pressure on individuals to be involved in gang activity. By removing the anti-gang legislation, it has now been easy now that a gang member can do a full-page advertisement to vulnerable youths and tell them, listen, you can easily join us now. We can advertise, and whereas the numbers would have diminished, the numbers can very well increase. And I know persons have used, Mr. Chairman, the concern that say that not many people have been arrested. But just to clarify, I was the one who actually first brought the concept of anti-gang legislation into the country in 2006 from another place. And thankfully, the then Minister of National Security, he took the baton, he moved with it. And what we have seen internationally is that you don't get the success of the anti-gang legislation based on the number of persons arrested, but by providing systems to prevent them from being a proper cohesive system. When you look at crime, crime is a product of opportunity, so the value of that legislation helped us tremendously. By removing it, it means now that these individuals no longer work in silos. When they work in silos, it's easier for us to deal with them. When they work as a combined unit, similar to a business, you now have capital, you have organization, you have structure, you have intelligence gathering, you have specialists. You can now use greater profit now to pay off persons in the criminal justice system and even police officers. And even when we look at the number of persons arrested under that legislation, was 82 in the last 5 years, which meant that every month one gang member was arrested. That, I think, played a very big part to assist us in pegging back gang-related activity and to reduce the organized crime as it pertains to the criminal gangs. We also looked heavily at now, we go into, again, continuing in primary crime prevention, the concerns that we saw initially of state contracts. That also was tremendously diminished. Going into secondary crime prevention, I don't want to stay too long. I could elaborate if required. Secondary crime prevention involves taking the young persons away from a life of crime by putting systems in place so that they will utilize their energies in the right manner. That involves from better systems for sport, education, health, better recreational facilities. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service will continue to move heavily along that line, Mr. Chairman, where we have a system that we are planning, a Big Brother campaign where 1,000 police officers would link with 1,000 at-risk youths, working with them, being able to interact with them and be able to understand their needs and concerns. So the invasion of the communities was twofold. We were invading it by suppressing criminal activity, but also the invasion by putting a handshake and working with the at-risk youths. We were also working with the Ministry of Education. On the 7th and 9th of December, we worked with the Ministry of Education to deal specifically with this, whereby we were looking at 20 of the most at-risk or high-risk schools where we will be putting specific systems, some of the things I prefer not to mention for intelligence purposes, that would have assisted us greatly to pinpoint how it is that certain gangs were able to penetrate and utilize their systems to get and recruit young persons into a life of crime. Finally, as it pertains to the tertiary crime prevention, the criminal justice system, we speak, you have mentioned it, sir, but it is a fact that our recidivism rate is very high. We, unfortunately, when we do the work, we arrest and we charge, and then they go into prison. If there's not a proper system, the recidivism will be very high due to poor rehabilitation. And now you have that revolving door where they come back out, sometimes even being a more hardened criminal. Also, as it pertains to the criminal justice system, it makes it very difficult, even with me in the police service, where we have police officers who we see have been affiliated with gang members and made it difficult for us to deal with primary and secondary crime prevention. And sometimes when we have police officers who we know based on intelligence involved in such systems, even though they will be reluctant to do polygraph testing, and then I cannot take decisive action on them because you can't discipline a police officer based on intelligence. The person has to be charged, and it makes it very difficult for us. But as I said, so I can elaborate the concerns we have just before I close off here as it pertains to some of the flaws that we have seen with the failure, the collapse of the anti-gang legislation, the bail amendment bill. When we arrest an individual with 9 assault rifles, and that individual should not come back out, and then we have a situation where in Parliament, unfortunately, or even in the criminal justice system, persons will say it is okay for this man with 9 assault rifles, which, by the way, with 35 rounds of 5.56 each, it means that several hundred persons can be killed in a few seconds. We have seen what happened with these type of weapons in Orlando and other places. In some countries, this is deemed as terrorism. When we arrest these individuals, instead of keeping them away from society to ensure that they do not contaminate the minds of young persons, we are told that it is okay for them to get $5,000 bail because it's their right to get bail. If it is, unless we do what is required, so we will continue to arrest, we will continue to charge, and then if they get this easy access for bail to get back out onto the streets. I have actually heard a previous Attorney General who has now stated that it is okay and it should be right for a man who is charged for murder to be given bail. So we have not reached that point. But when it is, we have situations with gang-related activity, persons with assault rifles being given easy access to bail, it makes it very difficult for the police to operate in an effective manner, dealing with primary, secondary, and tertiary crime prevention as it pertains to this type of organized criminal gangs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner. Let me invite Permanent Secretary Johnson, who is here representing the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Youth Affairs, to make a few opening remarks, as did the Commissioner of Police. P.S. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Office of the Prime Minister is engaged in strategies that seeks the interests of children who may be or potentially may be at risk to join in gangs in 2 areas. One is prevention, and that happens by building the children's awareness of their rights and responsibilities. And it happens through the collaboration with other organizations that would drive certain programs like the parenting programs, other programs that treat with identifying and preventing child abuse. And we also deal with it at the level of rehabilitation, children who are in conflict with the law and must be placed in a children's home. What we try to do there is try to expose the child to certain programs that would prevent them from treating with gangs and or prevent them from considering the option of returning to a gang or joining a gang when they are removed from the home. So things like our transition program, where we provide the accommodation for them, the children's home program, where we provide the psychosocial support for them, those are things which contribute to their rehabilitation, making them less likely to rejoin or consider joining a gang. So those are the areas that we have been trying to treat with, and we can tell you more about what we have done and continue to try to do via the National Child Policy in addressing the needs of those children who are impacted by gangs. Very often, as we have seen, those are the children who lack the supervision required at home, and the gangs presents an option for them for love, to express their emotions, to express their power, to do a whole heap of things that they have been missing from their home and family environment. A lot of the work that we need to do here in the country must allow for the engagement of not only the police, but communities and families. It is not a job that could be done by the police or the Office of the Prime Minister alone. A lot of other agencies must come together to treat with gangs. I mean, the data is showing the reduction in the number of gangs, and that augurs well for us. But we still have a lot of children out there who are seeing the only option of the gang as a comfortable place to be. Thank you.
Madam PS, before I open the floor to my colleagues to begin the interrogation of all of you in the place, in the House, let me ask a sharp question. The public must be wondering, what does the Office of the Prime Minister have to do with this business? Has this division, this element, gender and children's affairs or child affairs, has it always been in the Office of the Prime Minister, or is this a recent development?
In 2015, the government made a decision to dismantle the former Ministry of Gender, Youth and Child Development and create a portfolio under the Office of the Prime Minister of Gender and Child Affairs. The Gender and Child Affairs Division remains the focal point for gender and child development in the country. We operate at a policy level, treating with the issues of children, managing the conventions that the government has created some obligation to, and the national legislation which treats with child development. Our service institution is really the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. However, we maintain the responsibility for policy, legislation, and we are engaged in some service delivery as it relates to building awareness on issues of child rights, child abuse prevention, care and protection issues surrounding children, the mental health of children. A lot of these things we are doing in collaboration with other agencies because we are not primarily the service delivery arm of government in these areas.
Yes, and of course, it must be recorded from my own understanding that the ministry, of course, is headed by the Prime Minister, and then you have Minister Webster Roy, who sits on this committee with us, a cabinet minister whose focus is that entire platform. And I think it was done to signal the government's, the stock, the importance that the government places on it. Would that be correct to say?
That's quite correct, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Now, I would want to open the floor to my colleagues who sit with me on this committee, and I would like to invite for a start member Richards, and then we will take it in turn as we have agreed to interrogate some of the issues raised by those who have visited with us here today. Member Richards.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone again. Good Carnival Monday afternoon to you. Must be a red that's a day for productivity in Trinidad and Tobago. We're working on Carnival Monday. So my first question, sorry, Chairman? Question goes to the Commissioner of Police, and I'll just give 3 questions in one so the Commissioner can answer them in turn. If you could give us, Commissioner, and your team, lay of the land as it relates to gang activity between 2017 or so, when you were appointed Commissioner, to today, and the gains made in that regard. I know there were, at that point, we had a presentation from the SSA where they were reportedly, depending on what report you took seriously, over 300 gangs in the country, and how many gangs, if you can tell us, exist in the country today. That's part A. The types of gangs, if there are differentials in the types of gangs you've been seeing, the trends in gang activity, including the evolution of gang, the profile of gang members and if they are Venezuelan gangs operating in Trinidad and Tobago, as have been reported but not confirmed but in the media. Also, if you could give us a sense, Commissioner, because I've done some research in this in other Commonwealth countries, and if you see it noteworthy to make a differential between criminal networks and gangs because of the changes in profiles in gangs, in many instances, there's a particular perception of gangs being from a particular national grouping, as opposed to gangs that come together temporarily to commit certain types of crimes, including financial crimes, and then dissipate after those crimes have been committed. And if you see it may be productive to have a differentiation between criminal networks and gangs. And also, three, in terms of the context of your comment earlier about sometimes misunderstanding about the success or lack thereof of the anti-gang legislation, and how many arrests were made during the I think it's a 3-year term for that legislation, and in the absence of, in light of, what you said, where arrest should not be the only metrics used to test, to assess the success of that anti-gang legislation, what are the other elements that you may be using or you have used to assess the success of the anti-gang legislation before it lapses, before it does not renewed? Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir. Now, as stated, the Attorney General, it might vary just a few. As it is at this time, we have the total number of gangs within Trinidad and Tobago being 134. I think the Attorney General was just a couple short of that. He had 120 odd, 129 odd. The total members within the gangs within Trinidad and Tobago, we have it as 1,056. We also have the breakdown of the gang members from some of the major gangs, the Rasta City, the Muslim gangs, the 6SI, XX, and there are a number of other smaller gangs. We know that there's the ABG, the Maloney gang, the Mover gang. Then sometimes you get the break off of these gangs. So what we have looked at all of the different aspects. But what we have noticed is that the recruitment, something of importance, especially in this topic here, the recruitment is that they're getting much younger. We have situations now where persons 14, 15, and 16 years old are now gang members. The window of opportunity is there for them. That is why we also work closely, my apologies, the Child Protection Unit in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. We also have been monitoring the situation where young boys who have, especially young boys, they've become vulnerable, easily accessible by gang members, and these gang leaders pull them in. They put them sometimes as a sentry. They give them a firearm. And then when we have the unfortunate situation where they have a firearm and then they confront with the police, then you will have the situation with police officers shooting even very young persons. This is not new. So California, Detroit, Chicago, New York, there was the same situation where there was a younger recruitment. And this is where it is so important at what we're doing here, trying to look for those vulnerable at-risk youths to try to find systems to make it difficult for them to be involved in being recruited. It makes it virtually impossible for us to do anything now because now it is legal to be a gang member. It is legal for a gang leader to contact any young person and ask them to join the gang. One of the few countries, it is now legitimate to be a member of an organization that can then use that now to commit further crime. So going on to your other points, when you spoke about the criminal network and gangs, the gangs that we see here in this country, it is very different to what you see in other countries from the Al Capone era with gang members in a suit. And people will say that there's always this Mr. Big. We do not have any intelligence to link these gang leaders working for anyone else. They may be affiliated with persons in different arms that may be in a shirt and tie or in a police uniform. So they use them as a support element. But the gang leaders, they run their own organization. And again, you'll see the difference in how young persons adapt to this type of activity. In some countries, you have the situation where they've prevented this even by how young men may dress, known as sagging, where the pants must be just above their knee. So all of these things, the avenues must be provided to make it difficult for young persons act, to talk, to be involved in that type of activity where they will dress like a gang member, the white vest. It now becomes a virtual uniform for some of them in different gangs. So you'll be able to pinpoint that person as a gang member or not. And again, going back to the legislation, because of the legislation collapsing, they now advertise and have jerseys to say that they are a gang member. So now it becomes, whether it is you wear a Chelsea, a Man U, or whatever jersey, you want to say that I'm affiliated to this. Now we have young men now promoting the gangs because it is easy accessible to have it, and there's no law against it. I don't know if there's anything else.
The question, Commissioner, the question about the involvement of some persons in some of the jurisdictions, the old paradigm of gangs being closely knit units and existing for long periods has evolved into gangs sometimes coming together temporarily, or persons coming together temporarily in gangs in terms of perpetrating particular crimes and dissipating because of the ability of law enforcement in those instances to more easily apprehend them if they stay together. Have you seen that sort of evolution in Trinidad and Tobago? And what information can you give us? You have been very vocal about corrupt police officers in the past. I think you referenced it earlier on, who may be assisting gangs. There's a situation in the East where there have been an arrest and charges. I don't want to go into it because it's now before the courts. And you have been very vocal on local media about police officers undermining the work of your team here and the majority of officers in the country by giving information, leaking information to gang members when you are doing your job, and what progress has been made in that regard. And if that information or intelligence has not been able to be turned into evidence to detain, arrest, and prosecute those officers.
Sure. So, okay. So let me run. Yes, apart from the organized gangs, and they have built their foundation, they will have hundreds of persons in their gangs. So they have capital, they have structure. And that's where they were involved in easy access to state contracts and so forth. So you have the established gangs, and they stay with it. They fight for turf, they fight for state contracts, they fight to keep a specific area. There are also what you will call those temporary gangs, because remember, the concept of a gang is that any group that decides to form together as a unified body specifically to assign themselves and align themselves to commit a specific crime. So if 4 persons decide to get together to rob a bank or to be involved in a criminal activity on someone, and they organize as a structure, they now become a gang. At the end of that, when they finish, they may all divert in different places. So that is that is what you will call a temporary gang. But that is, persons like this have also been arrested. I think you also mentioned about the Venezuelans. We have nothing to verify that there's any established gang comprising solely Venezuelans or any persons internationally. What we do have is that because of the influx of persons from South America, whereas most of them may be hardworking persons who just want to try to assist the country, obviously we have found criminal elements who have now got, infiltrated into the country, some here illegally, and they have now joined and become part and parcel of some of these other gangs. So they have used their type of training, their type of systems that they have used in South America in gang activity to try to establish and improve the standard of gangs in this country. There have also been clashes between the Venezuelan elements of gang members with established persons here who are gang leaders, and we have seen many killings that would have taken place even by Venezuelan nationals, on Venezuelan nationals. Finally, as it pertains to the police officers, yes, it is very difficult. So where we will have proper intelligence coming to us from the National Operation Fusion Center, or more so the SIU, and then when we are about to launch an operation to go after individuals, you would have police officers who may be covering for drug blocks, human trafficking, illegal entry of weapons, drugs into the country, and they will tip off some of the operations we are about to conduct, which is why the Special Operation Response Team has been very effective to deal with many of these situations when it comes to dealing with kidnapping, illegal entry of weapons, drugs, human trafficking, because every member of the Special Operation Response Team has been polygraphed. We do not have that for all police officers. I have spoken to Minister Hines, and we have written to the National Security Council making certain recommendations where it must be mandatory for police officers to be polygraphed if required. That is only mandatory, sir, when you join the police service. And after that, there's nothing that can hold to use polygraph testing, making it mandatory. And then if it is that you fail the polygraph test, if action can be taken, I do not have that authority. Likewise, for the first 2 years as a police officer, you are on probation. So they will be very careful not to be involved in any misconduct, because even based on intelligence, we can remove you after 2 years. I have also written to the National Security Council recommending that we could consider, as in some countries, contract systems for police officers, where every 5 or 6 years, persons coming into the police service now, their contract can be renewed after 5 or 6 years. This will immediately eliminate the 150 odd police officers that are being closely monitored and red flagged by the Professional Standards Bureau, the SIU, and other arms of the police service, where we monitor them carefully, closely, and try to keep them away from strategic places so that they will do less harm. But that is just basically trying to hide the problem.
Yeah. One last question, and I don't know how much of this you can divulge, because this is a live broadcast, and these are matters of national security in some instances. You mentioned SWORD earlier on. Can you tell us if there have been gang involvement in the recent kidnappings, and if there are gang dimensions or dynamics involved in rapes in Trinidad and Tobago? Because I've gotten some information that I can verify, that I don't know if you can divulge that or not, because some of the information is quite disturbing.
Sure. Okay. I could ask the head of the gender-based violence unit, and the gender-based, if you have anything that you would like to add on it. In the meantime, while she's getting her thoughts together, what I can state is that similar to what would have taken place in the unfortunate death of Miss Barrett, several persons getting together, strategizing, organizing to commit an act of violence on someone, that is a gang. It may not be an established gang, but we have nothing of established gangs being involved in that type of crime. The established gangs, primarily, their focus is to make money as much as possible. Then there's the ego situation, there's the blocks that they need to control. It is very difficult when it has been reduced greatly. But when you have spaces like Maloney and La Hoqueta, there are certain streets that one gang member cannot cross and get into the other. So there's a high degree of desire to control blocks and areas that no one else must enter, which is where you had these type of killings. But then the main aspect for the establishment of these gangs, they make money. They want to have contracts. They want to hire persons. And therein lies a very big concern that, again, I will push about illegal firearms. In London, there's no need for a police officer to even walk with a firearm, because people are aware of the consequences if you have an illegal firearm in your possession. Yes, it is easy accessible for firearms to enter the country. More so, it comes in through the legitimate ports of entry, not the illegal ports of entry as is perceived. But the point being is that when persons are held with illegal firearms, especially 15-year-old boys, they can then, or even gang leaders, the easy access for them to have that weapon seized and then come back out to commit further acts of violence. There's no deterrent and there are no consequences. And this obviously is taking its toll on young persons. Superintendent Guy Allen, is there anything that you could elaborate on?
No, sir, you have said it well.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay.
Well, just the part about, if you can divulge information, if there's information that groups of men, or if you want to call them gangs of men, have been seen to be preying on women regarding sexual assaults and rapes in the country over the past couple of months or years.
We have no evidence of that. The TTPS has no evidence of that activity taking place at the moment.
Thank you.
All right. Member Scotland.
Chairman. Right. Commissioner, as it relates to vulnerable youths, Commissioner, are you hearing me?
Yeah, yes, sir.
As it relates to vulnerable youth, I know that you would have your advice as it deals with the concept of restorative justice and having not a harsh approach, but looking at youth who are vulnerable with a different lens. Has the police, I know you mentioned you have an equivalent program. What did you call it? The Big Brother? What did you call it?
Yes, yes, sir. It's a Big Brother program. What was the actual name of it? It's a Crossroads. So the Crossroads is basically to get young persons. They have to make a choice. It's either you go left or right. On many occasions, the young persons they go the easier part, but narrow is the path that leads to righteousness. Broad is the way that leads to destruction. And so they will go along the path where they could see it is the easier way. They could get easy access to money. And the gang members influence these young persons into a life of crime by being gang members. What the police service we are doing now is putting those crossroads and getting these young persons to show, listen, you have an option, you have a choice. You can go along this direction. So it's 1,000 police officers being assigned to 1,000 at-risk youths. We are liaising with the children's court, the magistrates court, other facilities that hold young persons. So it will give young persons and their parents an opportunity to say, listen, we will take a hold of you and try to nurture you, be a big brother to you. That, I think, will play a big part to assist. I mean, it may seem like 1,000, but if it's just a handful of lives that could be saved from it, we would have achieved the objective. So,
Mr. Scotland?
Chairman.
Yes.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Are you hearing me now, Chair?
Yes, I am indeed. The floor continues to be yours.
I would like to suggest, Chair, through you, a different lens as it relates to young persons. I do agree that the making of crime unattractive is one aspect. I would like to see us impose and try to have as a meaningful program, and there are persons through you, Commissioner, who are trained in this area of restorative justice, where we try to help youth before they embark on either one, a life of crime or a life of gang, or two, after. In that, we have programs, and I would like the police service to be interested in it. You would, if you do the learning, you would know that restorative justice began from the Mennonites and the police officer in New Zealand who had troubled youth, and he adopted a softer approach, not to mollycoddle, but to take a different lens. For example, looking at root causes of crime, looking to see if we can eradicate those things, looking at alternative approaches to life, which is what your Big Brother program is doing. Can you tell us, sir, if you think that the police service is adequately invested and empowered to adopt a restorative lens as it relates to young persons so that they are not lost fully in crime?
Yes, sir. I'll ask the community relations team from Superintendent Ramkilawan and Sergeant Small. They could elaborate on it. But from our police youth clubs, 117 odd, the use of the police youth clubs dealing with core development strategies from education, sports, the environment, personal development, cultural, skill development, and we look at expected outcomes. Also, the concept of sport, the use of the Commissioner's Cup. The Commissioner's Cup wasn't a football tournament, but it was an opportunity to get young persons to burn their energies in the right manner through sport. And they were able to work together as a team. It was able to bring communities together. It had different communities now working together as well. So sport has proven to be a very big aspect, which I think has been something underutilized for too long in this country that can actually assist. But if with your approval, sir, I'd just like to ask the Community Relations Department to elaborate on this.
Greetings, Chair.
Chairman, I have no issues with that.
Thank you, sir.
Greetings, Chair and members. Let me first say, through the Community Relations Department, we address several issues related to the identifying of vulnerable youths in various station districts where we have our police youth club functioning. We address same through the station councils at the station districts. And in identifying the youths, we use our community visits where we meet, greet, and treat with members and NGOs of the various station districts, from where we gather our information intelligence, and we then identify youths at various streets and we then bring them into our police youth club frame. We also have school visits, our home visits program, our street talk programs. We have a lot of other police community councils through the station district where we meet with stakeholders. And there we identify the at-risk youths, as we would call them, and bring them into the fray of our police youth clubs. What we do at our police youth clubs, we have 7 main pillars where we address all these issues. We have the educational side, we have sporting, environmental, we have social community, personal development. We also look at skills development, cultural side. Trinidad and Tobago is generally known throughout the world as a culturally established nation of people. However, these at-risk youths, they don't really need rehabilitative work. They need redirection. We are redirecting our youths into the right frame of mind. We are molding and shaping the youths at our police youth clubs to become better and worthy citizens. We encourage them and we mold them into becoming better decision makers. We have a lot of programs that we use at our youth club level. So just by identifying them through the community relations aspect at the various divisions we have throughout Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and an intervention in terms of probably we just look at speaking to them there and then 1 or 2 off visits. We now enroll them into our programs at our police youth club where we can monitor and evaluate them. And then if so be it, we will bring in the clinical psychologists and all the other social workers to help us in assisting the youths in their development. So again, I say we have a lot of programs that we do at the youth club level that treats with assisting our youths. We also look at through the home visits, we have identified siblings and the extended family system where parents also need the help. Grandparents also need the help. Adult siblings need help. And we have a lot of information coming to us whereby which we now reach out to the adults at the home through our police youth club, although they are not members, and afford them a lot of parenting skill courses, decision-making classes and stuff like that. So all in all, we are building a bridge between the police and the community through intervention of our police youth club.
Chairman?
Sorry, Mr. Scotland, please.
No, Chairman, I always give way to you. When you're finished, I will ask my follow-up question.
I give way to you, Mr. Scotland.
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner, you, and I know this from first-hand information where you do sometimes come in for criticism, but there are times when you must give the commissioner his kudos. Commissioner, are you hearing me? Chairman?
Yes, indeed, I am.
And is the commissioner hearing?
I am.
This initiative that you have embarked upon, your youth club initiative, the Big Brother partnering, maybe some of your officers have not been sensitized enough. I recall an instance where we needed your direct intervention in an area, I will not call the area, where good work was being done. But we were being met with stopgaps and we were being met with walls from your officers because they don't see that, because it's not a traditional way of policing. What are you doing? And you had to intervene directly. I will not condescend to specifics, but I'm sure you recall. What are you doing? What is as the commissioner to sensitize your officers to say, well, this is another parallel way of policing which we must look at, and it's not always about detention, detection, arrest, conviction, but sometimes it could be prevention, and it's working well in that area, the area where you have intervened. What are you doing to sensitize your officers to this approach, especially as it relates to young persons?
Well,
Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you, sir. The main thing, what I recall about 15, 20 years ago, a commissioner of police said that when someone was asking about community policing, the commissioner said that every police officer is a community police officer. No, that is incorrect. The same way it is that we have specific officers trained in gender-based violence, because we would have police officers who may not understand the sensitivity, confidentiality for someone who has been sexually abused. That's why you have specific persons trained in that. What we lost that element of that community policing. When I started doing research, I started discovering that police officers who are assigned as community police officers would be assigned to be involved in roadblocks, to be involved in all sort of different aspects, and not that element of community policing. The success of community policing worked close. It was blatant, especially in that situation 2 years ago in Chaguanas, where we were able to, Chaguanas was a virtual war zone, and especially through Sergeant Small, who's on my immediate right, we were able to do exactly what you said, sir. So we have now started putting immediate emphasis on the community policing unit. It'll be foolhardy for me to state that I can get all police officers to understand. You're going to have police officers who may be very tactical and operational, and there will be some who will understand that human element of understanding that the more we put emphasis in that type of policing, the less need there would be for us to be involved in the hardcore policing. And that is where it is we have put a lot of emphasis now from the Commissioner's Cup, the police youth clubs, dealing with the Big Brother program. These things will ensure that less young persons will become vulnerable or influenced in criminal activity. So we have put emphasis on it, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Let me give way to Member Ayana Webster-Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, in your opening statement, you noted that you have noticed that they're recruiting younger persons into gangs. And I wanted to find out if you have any evidence to show where in communities where you have police youth clubs operating, if that they have fewer gangs operating in those communities, as well as if there's any evidence to show where the police youth clubs can contribute towards reducing the rate of recidivism among those young persons who come into conflict with the law.
Yes. If with your permission, if Sergeant Small can assist in answering that, I can elaborate.
What the gangs have been offering to, I remember you mentioned.
Go closer.
I know you mentioned, Mr. Scotland, root causes earlier. And once we identify some of the root causes like broken homes, single parent homes, a lot of poverty, we are able to now recruit these young men and women to become members of the police youth club. Not only the police youth club, but through the community police approach, we have that one-on-one touch with these children and their household. So in some cases where we identify things like poverty, networking, we're able to network with like Ministry of Social Development, provide some social support, Ministry of Labor to provide employment for members of the household. Through the Commissioner's Cup, we were even able to have that one-on-one touch in terms of the gangs offering money, work, employment, are talking about things like selling drugs on the block and whatever. We were able to replace that by partnering with certain business people also to provide interim employment until they reach the right age, like 18 years old, to be able to be fully employed and that kind of thing. But, you know, that whole level of support, the community police, the police youth club, we have been able to offer that generally.
So is it a fair assessment to say that in communities where we have active youth clubs, that we don't have as many young persons being recruited into the gangs?
Yeah, definitely. Because of the police presence in these communities. Once we see school dropouts in Central, we had an issue with a lot of school dropouts. We were able to target them, make sure that they realign themselves with school. So you'll go to the home, find out why the child not in school, make sure that they, be reintroduced to the school system. In some cases, we even had to redirect them to places like Serval, to CCC, so other youth programs that, really help these young people. So we had a zero tolerance approach in terms of seeing at-risk youths on the blocks and just leaving them to do what they want. We went home by them, we checked them daily, we checked them weekly, we checked them monthly, we recruit them into the police youth club. For those who wasn't in the police youth club, we were able to direct them to like the scouts, because we partner a lot in Central and throughout Trinidad and Tobago, Because we, in terms of what other groups offering and what the direct need of that child may be, we do a lot of networking. So, it's a zero tolerance approach, and it have helped. And in the areas where we have this approach, we have seen a reduction in gangs and almost no youths on the block linemen as opposed to what's happening before.
I have another question. There are instances where young persons would get in conflict with the law. They may end up at one of our training and rehabilitation centers, or they may end up in a home. At the end of that period where they're at the home or at the YTRC, do you think it would be wise, or do you think there should be collaboration between the police service and other agencies to have those persons, when they're leaving, to be recommended to join a youth club, monitored and mentored from within a youth club in the community?
Well, almost immediately, when we identify some of these children that go to these institutions, we have such a close working relationship, and I could draw reference to Children's Authority with the CHINS child, children in need of supervision. We do a lot of visits to some of these homes. It's strictly confidential, but we do a lot of visits and keep that police in touch with these at-risk youths. Keep that police in touch in terms of visiting the household and follow up with them. So we don't just see them go to the homes and abandon them because we leave another institution to treat with them. We work together with those institutions to ensure that straight until these children become adults and young adults and adults, we're able to follow through and guide them and mentor them, because mentorship is not a one-off thing, but an ongoing process.
Mr. Commissioner, do you intend to increase the number of youth clubs operating in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, at this time, 117, I think it is appropriate, because everything is dollars and cents. The more youth clubs we'll have, obviously there's going to be a greater cost. But I think we have it straight across the country. Some youth clubs we would expand based on a greater need in a specific area. And I can make mention of this, ma'am. One of the things that we have seen that the youth clubs have assisted is that it is not just for young persons who become vulnerable and easily influenced that they join gangs, but we have also seen a new system now where peer pressure or pressure being pushed on young persons in specific communities that will practically force them to say that they have no choice but to join a gang. So they will have several other young persons who are their friends, would put pressure on them. Sometimes they would be pressured by adults who are gang members that they have no choice. And that is where the youth club and the policing must come in place now to make sure that they are not pressured into doing something that they do not want to do. So that peer pressure in their community by other young members being gang members and the gang leaders putting that type of pressure on them, it has become very difficult. We even have the point where the pressure even comes within the home, where you'll have a young boy at 15 or 16 bringing in $10,000 cash and drops it on the table. And the grandmother, the mother, would turn a blind eye because they want it. And then if and when, heaven forbid, something happens to them, then they want to point fingers at everyone else. So even that pressure within their own home, there's that problem that we have, that we are trying to deal with even family members, to understand you have a responsibility. You can't turn a blind eye because your young son is now giving you gifts and it's assisting you in your home. But there's going to be a price to pay eventually. So that pressure that a young person has from even within his home, with his friends, and even gang leaders in the community, it is very difficult for a young person to resist all of this unless you have that support element. And that's what the youth club will do, especially in these communities.
Commissioner, before I invite one of my other colleagues, let me make a quick intervention here. It is that kind of pressure and engagement that the anti-gang law in part dealt with, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Exactly. Yes, sir.
And now we are without that protection, that level of possibility and protection. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. And that will cause the peer pressure or the pressure on that young person is easily accessible for him now.
Let me say this. I operate as Member of Parliament for Lavington West, as indeed all my colleagues all around Trinidad and Tobago would experience, because crime is not exclusively a Laventille problem. It is all over this country. I trust you would agree with that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this myth about Laventille, however, I represent Laventille West and Laventille generally. And I'm very much aware of the very, very good work done by the police youth clubs, Mr. Subero and all of the teams. I am very, very much aware and take the opportunity really to congratulate the officers for being ever present in the community and doing that work. However, it is a fact that alongside all of that good work and the activities of the police youth club, there are gangs operating in the same Laventille and all over Trinidad and Tobago. So it seems to me that while we engage hundreds, if not thousands of young people in the youth clubs and the other social programs, those who are bent on a life of crime, they continue to operate alongside those who are working in the youth clubs. Mr. Scotland's question really was, as I understood it, are the police going with a rehabilitative philosophy after the known gang members rather than the others in the community who are not so known and who you engage in the youth clubs and prevent from getting to that? Yes. But Mr. Scotland, I take it, was implying that he wanted to know whether the police takes a rehabilitative approach in going to those who they know are already engaged in gangs and try to see if they can get them in the youth clubs and weaned off of that empty life. I hope I got Mr. Scotland right.
Indeed so, Chairman. Indeed so.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner.
Yes, and again, I will refer to the Community Relations Department, but that is correct. We do that. So obviously, we would look at specific persons. The youth club must not be one where we are just waiting for persons to come to the doorstep and sign and apply. We do get that, especially from parents who want to make sure that their children can be guided in the proper manner. But we also do a fact-finding mission where we can look at vulnerable young persons. And that is where that crossroads will come in, because the youth club could do so much. But 1,000 police officers being able for us to pinpoint 1,000 young men who may, and women as well, who may be deemed as possible at-risk youths that may, the deeper he goes, he might be out at the point of no return. And also those who have already been held, incarcerated in certain homes. We can now use the opportunity of this project to assist with those to start with 1,000. I could, Sergeant Smaller.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I did in fact mention that through our police youth clubs, we do a lot of home visits, whereby which we get the opportunity to meet with other members of the home. More so, we work directly along with our operational units. And when exercises are held and persons are arrested at the home, we do in fact have children at the homes there who are not members of our youth club, but in some way they are vulnerable. So we do target the children, yes, but we talk about the other members of the home. We afford them the opportunity. It's a voluntary type system to participate in our adult programs and through our youth clubs in trying to rehabilitate that family.
Let me say, as a member of parliament and as a citizen with access to a forum like this, what the police are doing with the youth clubs is just a small piece of a panoply of other measures taken in other government agencies, where there are a host of other training and mentoring programs available. So we commend the police for doing their little piece. What the public sees, Mr. Commissioner, though, is a very, I would describe as combustive relationship often in many communities with the police, where there's this antagonism between the community and the police. How does the Commissioner explain that in the context of your work in community policing and so on? At first, I want you to acknowledge if that exists, the combustive relationship in many communities, and how do we explain it, and how are we trying to deal with that from a policing perspective?
Yes, sir. The first thing, primarily training. We have been doing constant training, and you would have seen it. You would have seen the training now where before, and going across the board, where persons may have been uncomfortable in a roadblock, when police would confront them, because of the effort we've been putting in public relations, good customer service, you're starting to see the difference now with how the public interacts with the police. They are more comfortable. Likewise, as we go into the communities, there's one type of policing, as I mentioned, primary crime prevention, and that is the persons with their shields and their batons, and they are going in there in an aggressive manner based on confrontation to quell a situation based on the minimum use of force. But that is the end result. That is when we have reached a point of violence and confrontation. Way before that, the aspect of policing that, as I said, has been discarded for far too long or put as a back-burning issue must now be something as a front-burning issue. Training our police officers, especially putting the community police officers at the forefront in these communities. So it is not about going in there with a fist. It is taking that same fist, extending your fingers and turning it into a handshake.
Thank you.
More time on.
Thank you. Let me give way to Member Mitchell and then Member De Freitas immediately after him. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one is to the Commissioner of Police. I've experienced the work of the Hello?
Yes, sir.
Are you hearing me, Chairman?
Indeed, Mr. Mitchell, I am.
I'm sorry, yes. I've experienced the work of the police youth groups, the one in Pleasantville and San Fernando, and I have to say that I commend the work that they do fully. But Mr. Commissioner, I want to touch on you spoke about the criminal justice system and you mentioned bail. So I know that you would have been somewhat handicapped by the automatic repeal of the Anti-Gang Act. I understand that. But there's a question on everybody's mind with these criminals where they are arrested and charged and they go before the magistrates and they are repeatedly granted bail. Now, from my understanding, bail is subject to judicial discretion. And when an application for bail is made, there is a police prosecutor on behalf of the prosecution, and they may also make representation. They may object to bail, or they may place no objection before the court. But we see, as in the Andrea Barrett case, we hear of persons who are getting bail on a number of occasions. And we hear that it is because of the police are not resisting applications to bail. Can you tell us what is the police's policy with respect to bail, or whether there are any problems outside of the police's control that allow these career criminals to continually get bail? Sure,
sir. Now, again, in other countries where certain systems, it is automatic that it will be deemed as, again, for example, someone found with an assault rifle. In some countries, that will be deemed as terrorism. Automatically, no bail will be given for that's basically the most violent of crime. Here, what we have seen is that the courts say that if it is that you are not making it mandatory that they cannot get bail, that you may make it mandatory, that is not stopping it, they are going to allow it. So unless it is that we put a law to give to the magistrates will know if this charge comes in, you cannot get bail, they are going to give it. And the perception stated, even in this latest incident, out of these 78 charges, I just got the information here, there were only 7 cases that were dismissed because of non-appearance of the police officers. I can't act for or make any change for what happened prior to my tour of duty, but there's been a 93% reduction in non-appearance of police officers in the last 2 years in comparison to before my tour of duty. So on my watch, a 93% reduction. So the red herring that is being thrown by some to say that is because police have not been attending court that has caused this situation. That is not true. 93% reduction in non-appearance of police officers. And may I add, with the 7%, every single occasion now that a police officer does not attend court, they must answer. So now we have put consequences, and now we have provided a deterrent. We will have the reserve police officer in case that officer who may have been the complainant, whether it is that he has left the service or he's on sick leave or whatever. So we have put systems to prevent that from happening. So the red herring being used to blame the police. I am aware there's an association. They spend every single release. I wouldn't call it media association name, but every release they mention is about telling us how to police. But the perception of stating that is because of the police non-appearance, not true. Of the 70 cases, charges, 7 was based on non-appearance, and that's by one police officer in Tobago. So it comes now to the police, and you're correct. We would look at it on a case-by-case basis, but anyone could see in their right mind, 5 different magistrates allow this individual to be released. 5 magistrates at different occasions. That has nothing to do with the police. The magistrate would have seen dozens of charges by the individual, so you'd have seen a track record. And may I add, this has caused a major problem to cause gang-related activities, because when persons are aware that anyone will have easy access to bail, I am not going to come forward as a witness. So when I don't come forward as a witness, it makes it difficult for the same police officer now to move forward with his case, because the witness previously who was willing to testify is no longer willing to do so because of his fear of reprisal, because of the easy access in that revolving door of bail. So the witnesses will not show up. The witnesses also may disappear, because now the person who has been given bail now has easy access to get back out onto the streets, purchase another firearm, and then unfortunately may commit some act to have that witness disappear or threaten that witness so that they will not act. And with that now, it makes it difficult for the police to pursue the case. But then you blame...
Commissioner, let me, and I crave my colleagues' indulgence just to intervene on that specific point. Whose responsibility it is, as you understand it, to protect that potential witness and his family from that fear that eats away at the heart of the justice system, because evidence is at the lifeblood of it. And if witnesses are afraid to come to court, my question is, who is responsible for dealing with that fear? If it is the police, how do you do that?
Sure, sir. Well, 2 things, sir. Firstly, there's the witness protection program. And in total contrast to the misleading information, again, by persons who always see the glass half empty, Trinidad and Tobago is one of the few countries in the world where we have a 100% success rate with no person ever being harmed in our witness protection program. This is totally different to someone who may be a witness for the state and would refuse to be on that program. But anyone who is in the witness protection program, not one occasion has anyone been hurt or killed whilst in that program. So we have a 100% success record.
Except of course, if he runs away like a former guy, a guy who lost his life on the Solomon Hochoy Highway, on the Butler Highway, remember that?
Clint Huggins, yes.
Unless if he ran away, if he break camp.
Yes,
Clint Huggins.
That is right.
Over a carnival weekend in Sandy Grande.
Yes.
Proceed, Mr. Commissioner, proceed.
Yes. Clint Huggins, correct, sir. So going to the second part now, those persons who do not want to be in the witness protection program, the police, it is virtually impossible for the police to protect every single person who is a state witness. What we can do is to go in that criminal justice system that if someone is held for violent conduct, for rape, for kidnapping, when it is that they do not get bail, it will ensure that the witnesses would remain alive, that the witnesses will not disappear, that the witnesses will not now be concerned of reprisal, because the person who they are providing evidence on to make sure that person remains incarcerated when the case ends, they will now come forward. If it is we have this simple revolving door that someone could come back out after being charged for rape, murder, kidnapping, because we do have a previous Attorney General now saying it is okay, let us have bail for persons who are on murder. When you do that, the witnesses for that individual would either now disappear or just be reluctant. And with that now, it makes it very difficult, and it makes them an easy target. you are obviously going to be a target if the person who you are giving evidence on is now going to have easy access to get back out onto the streets. That, sir, until the
Sorry, can I just interject for one moment, please? I just want to register my concern that we keep referencing a matter that is before the court and it is in violation of the sub judice rule, and it ought not to be that we keep referencing this matter and getting into the ifs, buts, and maybes of how that decision in that matter could affect the operation or the impact on anything. At this point in time, it is in violation of the sub judice rule. Just to register my comment, please.
Well, let me as chairman say. Let me, as chairman, say in response to this, and very, very quickly, without belaboring the point, I accept, as we have always been, careful about our comments on matters that might be deemed to be sub judice. But of course, the sub judice principle goes a little further than mere mention, you know. It really speaks to the question of attempting to influence the judge or the arbiter or the magistrate to interfere with their decision-making. And therefore, I do accept the principle, and I urge that we will all be cautious, but the principle requires a little more than mere mention, as we have so far done. But we can proceed in terms.
Yes.
We proceed in terms.
I understand the rule. However, I do feel that if we are speaking about the impact of a decision on that matter, on certain things, that we are violating the rule. Just to note my comment, please. Thank you.
And all we do as well is to recognize that this is a public hearing. And taking all that into account, the public of Trinidad and Tobago, who the police serves, who the office of the Prime Minister serves, who the Parliament serves, they have some concerns. They want to understand certain things. And justice must not be a cloistered virtue. But I do accept your point, and we will all be guided in terms. Commissioner, as you were saying.
Yes, sir. Again, so going back, this is not an isolated case. I am generalizing where persons across the board, be it kidnapping, rape, grievous bodily harm, armed robbery, when witnesses are there to give evidence to the police and persons have that easy access to bail, it affects the police greatly in the success of us coming and be able to prosecute. But also, if you do not have the witness, the case would be delayed. And when the case delays, it becomes a domino effect. So it really has taken its toll. And likewise, as I said, when it is if we get hardened criminals, what we are doing to the committee, we are doing good intelligence. We are arresting, we are charging, and then the individual smiles because he knows regardless of what we do, he is going to come back out and continue his act. So there is no consequence. And because of that, these same leaders now get back out onto the streets to affect and poison the minds of young persons.
And that's the reason why, Commissioner, we indicated early that you, representing the police, would be with us today, but we will have information coming from all elements, all the stakeholders in the entire criminal justice process, of which the police is an early player in all of this, very early. Let me give way then to Mr. Mitchell to finish his line, and then, of course, Senator De Freitas.
Thank you for yielding back my time for me, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Commissioner, just going on to the same point, and I think the information that you spoke about with respect to the improvement in police attendance would be beneficial to this committee. So if you can please submit it to us. So I was just on the matter of bail. So you're saying and you're confirming for us that where an individual, an accused person is charged and goes before a magistrate, makes an application for bail, police aren't in attendance, and there is some policy out of the police, where the police prosecutors know when to resist an application for bail or when to allow bail. There is some position. Because again, my understanding is that you have a right to apply for bail, except in the case of murder and so on. But the question of bail is subject to judicial discretion. So I'm just trying to understand on the part of the police that they are ready, they have their antecedents, and they, when it is appropriate, they resist applications for bail. So, Commissioner?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry about that, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it makes absolutely it has no value, because almost on every occasion, bail will still be given. Where the magistrates have, the concept is that there's no law that if it is that someone comes up, that bail must not be given. So they have now made it, the courts have made it mandatory virtually that bail must be given. So regardless of if we protest, what will happen is that they will state there's no law that prevents it. So if there's no law that prevents it, we must give it to them. And therein lies the problem, where almost every occasion other than murder, so far, that persons, they turn up there at the court, regardless of what they would have done in the past, that it is very difficult for any magistrate to see a magistrate now coming forward to agree to deny bail. So even though we will object and we will make our decision, it is, and we have done it numerous occasions, it is ignored and bail is given.
So your position is that magistrates, they exercise their discretion in favor of the accused.
99.
In most instances, unless there is some legislative provision that prevents them from doing so.
Correct, sir. Unless that legislative provision is given, I cannot see anything changing in the near future. For example, a man might be charged for 70 different things and they will still give bail.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you, Chairman.
The reason for that, gentleman, Commissioner, in our view, is because the Constitution gives or asserts the right to bail. The understanding is that a person is entitled to bail subject to a few exceptional circumstances. And that's the reason why you see the magistrates behaving how they do. So again, the issue is one for the legislature, for us to design, as we have done in the past, arrangements to give the courts the opportunity to say no, because the Constitution guarantees the right to bail in section
Mr. Chairman,
5.
is it the right to bail or is it the right to apply for bail? Because there's a Bail Act that outlines a number of matters that the magistrates must have regard to in the exercise of the discretion.
I would say it's the right to...
certain.
So, Mr. Chair,
Scotland.
the Constitution guarantees the right to not to deprive reasonable bail without just cause, actually.
Chairman, may I
All right, just a moment, folks. Just a moment. Mr. Scotland, please proceed.
Chairman, from Felicia Constantine to the cases in Singapore, it is a right to bail which is constitutionally enshrined. What you have is there some circumvention now of circumstances whereby your bail can be denied, for example, if the magistrate under Section 6 or the judge considers the seriousness of the offense, the prevalence of the offense, the antecedents of the offender. Because remember, and I want to say this to the commissioner just to bear it in his consciousness, bail is not a sentence, you know. The purpose of bail is to ensure, Chairman, remember the case of Felicia Constantine, is to ensure that the person who is granted bail appears in court. Until such time as that person is found guilty by an appointed tribunal under the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, that person who is charged has a presumption of innocence. Even in the last incarnation of the bail amendment, the case of it was the matter that we did in the Court of Appeal. It's now before the Privy Council, and the courts held that even with the amendment, a court was still entitled to grant bail. You know.
Yeah, bail is a deep constitutionally entrenched right,
and it's not the penalty unless when you are found guilty, then your right to bail and your presumption of innocence is dislodged. And the case is this Daniel St. Omar versus the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago.
When you are found guilty, it is not your right to bail, but your liberty can now be forfeited.
It is forfeited unless overturned by the Court of Appeal.
Let us give way to Senator De Freitas. Mr. Member De Freitas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have been listening to everything that's been said so far. And as much as we started talking about, bail and the right to bail and whatnot, let me tell the committee as well as all members listening exactly how this is looking to not only the public, but to those who are not legally minded. So the police commissioner just indicated that, he gave us some numbers in relation to police officers turning up for cases and whatnot. And in the public domain, we heard that the judiciary, when the issue came up, spoke to, what the problem is and what they thought should be done. And so to the general public domain, what you're seeing is that the TTPS is blaming the judiciary and the judiciary is blaming the TTPS. And in my mind, both these institutions are supposed to be working together hand in hand in terms of protecting the citizens. The police commissioner is absolutely correct in the sense that these individuals who engage in gang activity and criminal activity are well aware of the fact that they can commit these crimes and there's no repercussion, so to speak, because they could be out again, whether they get bail, and committing the crimes. We've just seen that in the public domain where a certain individual had 70 cases, all of which they've gotten bail. That is 70 cases and 70 times where the TTPS had cause to charge an individual because for some reason or other, they were involved in some way through evidence and the DPP instructing the charge on criminal matters. My point is that there's a massive disconnect in terms of what we're discussing today. We are discussing programs and methodologies for reducing gang activity. My question is this to the police commissioner. How can we really think that we have the ability to reduce gang activity when there is no repercussion whatsoever? You've stated the ability to prevent individuals from engaging with the gangs in the first place. But the fact remains that once they enter the gang, because these gangs that are there are still recruiting, they're still getting people to get in. And once they get in, there's nothing to change their minds because there's no repercussion unless the system works to charge them and put them in jail. So are we just spinning top in mud? Because if they're still getting people in, it means they can still engage in criminal activity with impunity to the detriment of all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Police Commissioner.
Again,
Commissioner?
Yes, sir.
From a policing perspective, the question is, are we spinning top in mud?
Well, there is hope, sir. We have done a lot, but going back to legislation, if it is that it is no longer a crime to be a gang member, we have now provided the product of opportunity for young persons to be involved in this type of organized crime. I know defense attorneys will have a difference to my view on this, sir, but going back, it is the constitutional right of someone to have bail. But I am fighting for the constitutional right and the most fundamental rights of law-abiding citizens, which is the right to live, the right to be safe, the right to be secure. In many countries in the world, to this committee, what I am speaking about is done. Any magistrate or any court will look and realize the track record of the individual. If this individual becomes a harm to society or any citizen out there, his freedom is revoked until the case will commence. But this is one of the few countries that anything, to the point very soon, even murder, you are saying it is your constitutional right for bail. This means that a person who has been raped, who has been kidnapped, what about the constitutional rights of the victims? What we have seen is that the scales of the criminal justice system has been tilted so much to look after the rights of criminals, the rights of the law-abiding citizens have now been affected. And that, because of that, it is obviously going to affect the young persons because now they see the product of opportunity is there. There are no consequences because we keep saying it is the constitutional right for you to get bail. So why stop?
Well, Commissioner, you are very active. You are very active advocate of a well-known jurisprudential principle, I must say. Let me invite Madam Lakshmidial, Member Lakshmidial, to put any questions that she may have to both the Office of the Prime Minister and the Commissioner of Police on behalf of the police service, or the members of the police team who are before us. Member Lakshmidial.
Sure, thank you, Chair, and I'll declare my interest up front that I am involved in some of the litigation that you all are consistently referring to. So I'm just declaring my interest. For the Commissioner of Police, you have spoken about the fact of the lapse of the anti-gang legislation and the ability of persons to now recruit. Has the Office of the Commissioner of Police, if it is that persons are coming together and you have intelligence or which can be then investigated further and can be produced as evidence that persons are coming together to commit offenses, have you looked at or have you sought advice on the ability to charge these persons who get together to commit offenses under the concept of aiding and abetting criminal activity?
Yes, good question, ma'am. And you're correct. But it is obviously going to be much more difficult without the legislation. But because now we have to look and try to find something to say that you are planning or thinking about committing a crime. But for they to reach there, they had to assemble as a gang. And that is where that would have been the preemptive strike. We would have as soon as they start assembling to try to decide on an organized crime, it would have been a criminal offense. It is no longer a criminal offense.
Sure, but what you're saying there then is that what you had hoped to accomplish with the anti-gang legislation is to be able to arrest persons without any, once there's evidence that they are planning to commit a criminal offense, then the aiding and abetting would kick in. So under the anti-gang legislation, you're saying that merely assembling and you having some sort of inclination that they are going to or have intention of committing a criminal offense was enough to charge persons under the anti-gang legislation?
No, not at all. We would obviously have enough evidence to verify that this gang has been formed, because you being a gang member. So let me clarify. In New York, I met with 3 New York police commissioners. The perception that we have here is that the value of this legislation is to arrest the individuals. That is not the case. The value of it is by preventing them from assembling in an organized manner to prevent them from taking part. So that's why when people speak about, let's look at the number of persons arrested, it is not the number of persons arrested. It is by making sure that we force them to operate in silos rather than as a unified body to commit a criminal offense.
How exactly does the TTPS go about forcing persons to operate in silos? If they aren't charged with any offense, what are some of the strategies that you would have been using when you had the legislation for 3 years to dismantle and to prevent persons from operating as a gang and coming together, but instead operating in silos?
Well, I think the SIU, I like Corporal Fraser, he will be able to elaborate on this.
Before he does, could you tell the public what SIU represents?
Right. Good day, Trinidad and Tobago. My name is Lyndon Fraser, police officer. The SIU stands for the Special Investigations Unit. The Special Investigations Unit is a department of the Trinidad and Tobago Police that deals with primarily investigations, and we also have an intelligence aspect to deal with. We heard, well, I want to thank Ms. Lakshmidial, first of all, for the question, because it's an important one for Trinidad and Tobago to note, in that the investigations in itself is not just a easy cut and paste, cookie cutter kind of thing. A lot of the investigation that goes on presently, not just at SIU, but within the TTPS investigative arm, involves a lot of painstaking, very long, not just recording statements, intelligence gathering, investigative work that does not just take 1, 2, 3 years. Sometimes it takes longer, and we've dealt with several investigations that incorporates extremely long, painstaking investigations. That being said, investigation in this aspect where we're dealing with criminal gangs may not necessarily involve just a quick fix in terms of detecting or seeing or hearing something occurring, police going to the scene and just picking up the person and arresting them for something specific. It involves a little bit more. That being said, we've had investigation where we have to go by the DPP over several months, sometime over a year, after a year, to ensure that the evidence that is taken before the court is tight enough for prosecution. In absence of just the tight prosecution, we just go and we have several cases that may be lost in the system, within the criminal justice system. And in the TTPS and the SIU, this is something that we do not want. We want to ensure that when an investigation is done and the case is complete, we can take it before the court, and we are sure that whatever is taken before the court in evidence is going to be a really, really tight case. And we don't operate on our own. We operate very closely with the DPP's department.
I think a simple, Madam Lakshmi Dayal, I just for the benefit of the public, I think, and I hope the lawyer in you agrees with this simple example. I think aiding and abetting are pretty antiquated concepts that require a lot more than the anti-gang law offered. For example, 14 men working together, very enterprising and so on, 2 weeks before a plan for a bank robbery takes place, one of them procures a vehicle and he makes it available to the bank robbers. Now, the court may find that that action 2 weeks ago, for example, we had a case in this country, Dolce and Company. One man went to buy chicken by KFC when the other side, he left with them, to go to the home of someone who they wanted. He left for some reason and he went elsewhere to buy chicken for the guys. While they were at the home, they called the boss and said the man not there. The boss said, then kill the whole family. There's the evidence in the case, and it's gone, so I could speak. Kill the whole family. It was found that he was not, although he was part of the gang, he was not sufficiently associated with that particular instruction and crime to have been caught in the net. The anti-gang law would have brought him home.
Well, I think that's that's an opinion, not a judicial one, but okay, it's an opinion of how the law may have operated. The fact of the matter is, have we had any cases like that before the court where a situation like that has actually been tested and anyone
We'll deal with these matters on the margin. What is your question to the Commissioner?
Have we had a question have we had a situation like that where anyone under the 3 years or that the anti-gang legislation was enforced, have we had a similar situation like what the Chairman just described, where anyone was charged under the anti-gang legislation that they may not have been able to have been charged before we had that legislation?
Before the Commissioner answers, he may want to respond to you that it is sub judice, you see? But then again, as I said earlier, mere mention may not be enough. Commissioner.
Yes, sir. So before I hand back over to Corporal Fraser, you're correct, sir. With the anti-gang legislation, it means that it is not just gang members may have been involved. If you have somebody who is working in a bank and was involved in trying to transfer money towards payment, that person would now have been pulled in to that whole concept of being part of the crime, whereas before he would not have been. But Corporal Fraser, please.
Right. I'm sorry, but my simple question, and Corporal Fraser has told me all about the process and going to the DPP and so on. 2 things. Has anyone actually been charged under the anti-gang legislation who could not previously been charged by aiding, abetting, counseling, or procuring the commission of a crime? 1. And 2, what are the mechanisms? You go to the DPP to make sure your case is secure and you work for 2 and 3 years and you collect data and so on and evidence. But you said that the value of the legislation is being able to dismantle the gang and force them to operate in silos. I'm asking, how do you go about doing that? What is the strategy?
I don't want to sound too condescending, but in absence of the anti-gang act, presently, we are unable to deal with the cases that we need to do because there is no anti-gang act.
Well, see, that's not the question. The question was what you did with it for the 3 years that you had it.
And that's what I'm trying to say. We have cases, we have matters presently before us dealing with investigative type, but we don't have the anti-gang act in place right now in order to proceed or go forward. We've been dealing with a lot of cases. We've also dealt with attempted murder cases before, while the Anti-Gang Act was enforced, that presently before the court can't speak to it. But we have been dealing with matters using the Anti-Gang Act. But in the present form right now, We just need to deal with it in different aspects.
Okay. So could you just give me a figure? I don't go into the cases at all. Just give me the number of persons charged under gang offenses under the Anti-Gang Act for the 3 years that it was in force.
48.
48.
48.
Okay. And those matters are still pending before the courts?
Correct.
Okay. Anyone convicted to date?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. Do you have any statistics? You discussed the bill that was not passed dealing with high-powered rifles and weapons. Do you have any statistics about how many persons were charged with those types of offenses and granted bail by judicial officers exercising their discretion?
I can get that for you within a few hours. I don't have it on me right now, ma'am, but we do have the breakdown for illegal firearms, which is almost it is easier for you to get bail with an illegal sidearm than if it is that you didn't pay maintenance. Not saying that is not a major crime, but it is the easiest thing to do for an illegal firearm. Assault rifles, what we would have seen, we have the breakdown.
Specifically about those, the ones that they tried to deal with Bail Amendment the Bail Amendment Bill number 2 of 2019. That's a specific one I'm asking about, which you mentioned would be qualified as terrorism in other countries. If you could ask, just provide those statistics, Commissioner. Sure. My next question. The Bail Amendment Bill Act, which is now law, the bill number 1 of 2019, which was passed, only mandates that the bail be restricted for 120 days until unless the matter is started, and then the person becomes eligible for bail. Do you know how many matters the police have been able to commence the prosecution within the first 120 days after the person is denied bail or was denied bail when the law is in operation right now?
Well, we would be ready within the 120 days on most occasions. The fact of the matter is that we are not the ones that would ignite when the case should commence. So we don't run the criminal justice system to decide when the case would commence. A quick point, however, is that one of the things that stop this from happening, you spoke about the assault rifles. There's always that perception for a law not to be passed because of the possibility that the police officers may have planted something. At no time have we had any situation of an assault rifle being planted on someone that they accuse the police of.
Okay.
All right. Commissioner? Oh, sorry. Madam Lachmidial, you have another question?
Yes. You see, Commissioner, in my practical experience, for example, I've seen, not cases that I am involved in, but I've seen where, for example, someone is denied bail because they have antecedents related to, let's say, illegal drugs. And they are accused of being in possession of a certain amount of narcotics. And after 2 years of being denied bail by the magistrate because of the amount and the quantity of the drugs, the analysis report is not yet ready at the Forensic Sciences Center, so the magistrate exercises his or her discretion to grant bail. So that's not the police officer's fault. It's neither the accused person's fault. And the magistrate is called upon to weigh the presumption of innocence against what Mr. Scotland has very succinctly and admirably described as the balancing of rights, which I consider to be the presumption of innocence against the right. And the right is actually, you don't have a right to bail. You have a right not to be denied bail, reasonable bail without just cause. So when the magistrate, after not just 120 days, but perhaps maybe 2 years, a matter isn't able to commence. Don't you think that resourcing of the TTPS, in that case, by the way, the issue was that they did not have the appropriately sized vehicle to attend the Forensic Sciences Center and collect the exhibit. The exhibit was 2 large crocus bags full of marijuana that the person was allegedly in possession of. And the TTPS in the Southwestern Division had no vehicle for about 6 or 7 months to be able to attend the Forensic Sciences Center and collect the exhibits and produce it to the court. So this is something I witnessed personally. And I'm asking now that in a case like that, don't you think that having an automatic denial of bail based on antecedents or based on the type of offense, drug offenses are very prevalent, as are firearm offenses, sexual offenses. Where does the box stop? If next week somebody burned down 3 buildings in Port of Spain, do we make arson a non-bailable offense and put everybody who's accused of arson in prison for 120 days until their matter could be started? That is the concern. And I want to find out if you don't think that a magistrate when the police present the factors under Section 6 of the Bail Act and they argue those factors before a magistrate, don't you feel that the magistrate gives a fair analysis of all of those factors?
Well, I think, Madam Lachmedia, that kind of question really asks the commissioner, does he think what the magistrate do is correct? It really takes us into a world that we can that is not germane to what is in front of us, because we are asking the commissioner. One moment, we are asking the commissioner what he thinks about what a magistrate may or may not have done. The commissioner has indicated what his view as a police commissioner is, and that is to protect the rights and the safety and the liberty and the lives of the people. And that's his perspective. And Mr. Scotland, on behalf of the society, has said, well, the Bail Act is a constitutional right, and therefore the concept of bail, and therefore this is what it is. So drilling further in terms of what the commissioner thinks about it, and in my view, doesn't really take us much further. And it asks the commissioner to give his own personal feeling, which is not germane to what we have in front of us. So let's formulate a more direct question so he can tell us what the facts are.
Well, Chairman, the commissioner has expressed a view that the magistrates weigh in favor of...
Yes, that's his opinion, and we don't want to engage him in more opinion.
No problem. I'm asking if he doesn't believe that when the Section 6 factors are argued before a magistrate, that magistrates make a fair determination based on the circumstances.
Well, let me try to protect the commissioner here. You know, the judges and the magistrates are deemed to know all of the law. In fact, they don't. It takes counsel on both sides to assist them, to guide them. The commissioner is a police officer. He'll know some. He wouldn't know all the details of Section 6 and then give you his opinion on it.
Oh, but I can.
You're giving the commissioner enough credit, Chair. I
can.
Yes, Commissioner, venture and answer. Let's ask Mr. Richards to join us and beyond this, because we have a little time allotment we must consider. So Madam Lachmedia, any further question or so for the commissioner?
Well, okay, if he's not going to answer my question on that.
Well, I can answer.
Please.
I want to move on, Chair. I would just like the statistics, if the commissioner could provide them later on how many of the cases where persons have been denied bail have actually commenced in the first 120 days after that denial of bail. So I would like to see those statistics as well, please, if it can be provided.
I will provide that for you, ma'am. And again, it goes back, that is outside of the control of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And even going back when people state that the police were not ready. If, for example, we have a situation with a shooting, whereas again, in some cities in North America, in 6 days, you can get the ballistic testing. It will take 6 years in this country. So if we have to wait 6 years for the ballistic testing, I understand where you're coming from. The person now is remaining there for 6 years because of a flawed system. So it goes right back to the criminal justice system. The same thing with the forensic department. So we have we have flaws in the criminal justice system that, yes, I understand, unfortunately, will make it difficult for someone who has been charged and he has to stay incarcerated for whenever because of a failed criminal justice system. What I think we should put priority on is, for example, a gun court. So within that 120 days, you put a gun court and you deal with it immediately. So you don't have this person just waiting for even 120 days or for violent crime. Having these cases go on for years, being postponed, it does not help anyone. It's no value.
Perhaps even a sexual offences court might.
Yes, correct.
You agree with me? Yes, thank you. But I understand what you're saying, that the 120 days and not being able to start is not always the police, and I agree with you. From my experience, it's a lot of the time it's forensics and so on. But based on that too, you would say then that apart from an automatic denial of bail for certain offences, maybe resourcing is a question that has to be looked at. If that restriction on bail has to be fair and balanced.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you very, very kindly, Member Lachmedia. Before I bring Paul Richards in again, I want to direct a question to the Office of the Prime Minister. Are they hearing me? Prime Minister's office?
No, she's there.
Yes, thank you very much. You did say in your opening remarks that you all are more like policy and resource supplying and that sort of thing in relation, and that you are not a delivery agency per se, and your main agency is the Children's Authority. Am I correct? I am not hearing you.
Correct.
Thank you very, very much. Could you, for the benefit of those listening and watching us, indicate what other agencies, apart from the Children's Authority, what are the other agencies within your purview and what they do in relation to preventing children, vulnerable ones, from getting in the grasp of those who want to recruit them for the Commissioner's attention?
And Chairman, if I could just before, because one of my questions is related to your question.
Please.
So this is one of my questions to the PS and the Office of the Prime Minister's Agenda. In terms of the vulnerable youth, which is part of the remit of this inquiry, and the allure in some instances to gang involvement vis-a-vis youth at risk, how much emphasis is being placed on research and data in terms of investigating family dynamics, the inequities that may position someone or a group socially disadvantaged, economically disadvantaged, educational deficits, etc., that may predispose them to being more vulnerable to gang activity, and what is being done in terms of value system realignment, if that is the case, from the ministry's perspective or the agency's perspective.
Chairman, as I said earlier, the Office of the Prime Minister would only engage those children who are in conflict with the law and they have been placed by the court and the Children's Authority in the care of the children's homes. And so the system has been designed to offer those children some who have been associated with gang some specific kind of psychosocial support, and leading to their proper transition into adult life when they leave the children's home. So our programs really would have been those transition facilities, one we have established for the young men, one that we're constructing for the young girls. The program within the children's home, those that we have direct responsibility for, we have a set of individually targeted programs designed to assist those children. And that's based on the individual plan that you design for a child once the child enters a home. Now, we have done some research and we understand the attributes of those children who are impacted by gangs. It's at the individual level, the family level, the community level. So we have a sense of what is happening to that particular child. So the program has to be designed around that child's specific needs. And that is what we have been trying our best to do with those children. So yes, the child would have had a socialization into a criminal life. You have to deal with a programming that has to reverse that. And we keep saying that we have to expand that area, treating with divergent programs for our young people entering into the care of the children's home. And that is exactly what what we call our wraparound program is designed to do. It is not the perfect program that we are running. We know we have resource constraints. We know we have gaps in facilities. One of the things that we're hoping to develop...
If I can just interject here. So the ministry has not decided to go in the direction of preventative and intervention strategies because there are several models. It's not even innovative anymore. For example, in the UK, 20 years ago, models were developed to look at family dynamics where in some instances, single mother situations, low socioeconomic proximity to urban centers were made certain persons predisposed and more vulnerable or at risk to being co-opted by gangs. I would imagine by now we could apply some of those models to Trinidad and Tobago to be more focused on intervention as opposed to waiting till the persons are co-opted by gangs and trying to do remedial work. They can work parallel, they can work hand in hand, they're not mutually exclusive. Is that part of the ministry's mandate at this time? More looking at situations, because the models exist. The social science models exist. They're not foolproof. None is absolute. But you certainly can look at certain situations and see trajectories if interventions are not profit or provided.
And Chairman, that is part of the ministry's approach. The ministry cannot do it alone, and a lot of the prevention efforts, you have to collaborate with other agencies of government and the NGOs. There is an understanding that we need to get into communities in order to prevent gang-associated behavior. We know we have to get into families, and there are certain things that would facilitate that, like the families policies, the parenting policies. We have done that. It's not that we have not been trying other things. We have been working with agencies to treat with that. One of the simple things that we have started to do is to liaise with the Ministry of Education to look at those children who have dropped out. Where are those children? Have we been able to identify it? We have found, based on our research, that some of them are entering the children's home. And why are they entering the children's home? You need to question these things and see how best you can help them at that level. But one of the things that you need to understand is many of them, based on our experience, are frustrated with the education system. So you have to work there. You have families who lack supervision, they lack the financial requirements to support a child, and therefore you need to do your intervention at that level with the families. A family which can't financially support themselves, the child is at risk of joining a gang.
Well, as I said before,
and so therefore you must approach, you must collaborate with the Ministry of Social Development, for example, to get some support for that family. If our thinking is that you need to leave children are best placed in their family. So the strategy is multifaceted.
Yeah. I'm surprised to hear that we're waiting till children are dropping out, as opposed to looking at their deficits in grades and performance as indicators of their possible trajectory. I want to move.
But no, Senator Richards, I understand P.S. Johnson to be saying that they first come into contact with children who find themselves in conflict with the law. So the typical child aged 13, 14, beginning to show behavioral and other challenges, academic and so on, in school and at home, and finds itself in the clutches of the law. Didn't join the police youth club, didn't get the sorting out from Mr. Subero and so on, and finds itself before the court. And the court then orders that child, I'm so sorry, the court then orders that child be sent to one of these institutions, St. Michael's Boys, or the Youth Training and Rehabilitation Center at that was formerly the YTC, and the St. Jude's Homes for Girls, and that sort of thing. And it is at that point that the PS and her team would have become in contact. So it was in the education system that the kind of analysis that you are now suggesting would more likely have ensued. And which brings me to the point, committee members. Clearly, in dealing with this inquiry, we may have to ask the Ministry of Education, for the very reason you have stated, Mr. Richards, to come and tell us a little bit about that kind of analysis before they become children in conflict with the law.
Thank you, Chairman. I think my academic colleague from USC, Mr. Moses, wants to make an intervention.
Your who?
So my academic colleague.
Thank you. Mr. Moses.
Certainly. I would like to support my PS's contribution by also adding to the table the development of the National Child Policy. The National Child Policy was developed in collaboration with various stakeholders, ministries, NGOs, etc. And a key tenet within that policy of the 6 tenets is that children are to be nurtured. It clearly outlines that one of our plans is to implement family support plans to enhance access for families at risk, children at risk and individuals who need that type of support. And so we did develop 3 plans that we seek to, of course, implement. One, to engage stakeholders in the evaluation of the needs through research to identify the gaps which you are alluding to in communities and in families. Secondly, to develop individualized support after that assessment to ensure that communities and families are supported. And finally, to implement those family and community support plans. So that is one of the plans that we have put in place in terms of research, data gathering, and of course, program assessment in collaboration with the Ministry of Social Development. And we did have a time frame as well. We have established our National Child Policy Committee. We did our letters out to select members. So members will be meeting this month to take this process forward.
Chairman, I just one more question through you.
You're more than welcome, Mr. Richards.
Actually, this question is to the Commissioner. The Commissioner spoke extensively about the progress made by his team. I have a question, Commissioner. First part is the anti-kidnapping squad still active? Commissioner Griffith.
Sorry, sir. Yes. Yes, the anti-kidnapping that they are very active. They will obviously be the frontline unit when in any situation pertaining to kidnapping. What we have done now, however, we have set up an operational command center. So it is not just the anti-kidnapping squad that will be involved in dealing with the kidnapping. The SIU would be involved. The SWOT will be involved. The cybercrime unit obviously will be involved. So there will be a number of different units that will work hand in hand with each other in an operational command center to be able to take all of the information for us to see how best. And the priority of it is always to try to retrieve the victim.
And finally, in terms of what you spoke about earlier, I think the chairman referenced the importance of public participation and witnesses and the issue of public confidence, trust, accountability, and transparency. Is there a standard operating detention and interrogation of persons of interest where best practice is concerned? I know the Commissioner is an advocate of technology where body cameras or recording devices are used. There's a situation I won't reference in the public domain, which has generated quite a bit of conversation about the questions about police practice, and it can seek, if not remedied or if not elucidated, to erode public confidence in the police and not encourage public participation. Is there a best practice where in interrogation situations there is a mandatory recording requirement, audio and or visual, to avoid public questions about allegations of public abuses of power, etc.? Is that a standing operating procedure, even in exigent circumstances, even in sensitive, high-stake circumstances, which we've seen in the past couple of weeks?
Yes, sir. It's interesting you use the word interrogated. That is what Minister Hines said, that we are being interrogated today. But this is a different...
I just think it's an inquiry. I don't think it's an interrogation. Yeah. And this is in need of the public getting a sense of what is best practice.
No, the minister said, no, he said, the chairman said we were being interrogated.
Maybe it's an interrogation.
No, but seriously, what you just spoke about, because of I am just waiting on the funding from the Ministry of Finance, which hopefully the Minister of Finance and the Minister of National Security, they have given me the assurance that very soon I would get the relevant funding. I intend to make it mandatory that all officers who are in, especially the frontline units, apart from the emergency response patrol, all police officers who go on foot patrol when they leave their vehicle, SWOT, IATF, MOPS, GEB, and the task force, that it is mandatory that each officer would have an issue of the body camera. And I do not think any police officer would object to this. In fact, the reason why I am pursuing this, it is not so much to be able to it is more to protect the police officer, because on most occasions, when it is that we know the lady in the towel who screamed, "The police too wicked," on many occasions we have seen false information and officers being accused incorrectly. The body cameras will now defend my police officers when wrongfully accused. So any police officer would want to have these cameras worn, and it will now become mandatory that it must be switched on.
Are you suggesting that if I could interrupt, are you suggesting that now in interrogation circumstances, I'm not talking about outside, when persons of interest are detained and taken into what I hope are standardized environments.
Yeah, you're speaking about, yes.
For interrogation, because I can refer you to what I did some research on the UK Home Office Code E revised the code of practice on audio and video recording interviews with suspects or detainees. Are you suggesting that presently, if members of the IATF sought anti-kidnapping, detain persons and take them for interrogation, there is no standard operating procedure, which includes recording of audio or visual all the way through without interruption, so that police officers can be exonerated if falsely accused, or if the public can have some sort of transparency and accountability in those high-stakes circumstances. Is that presently being done?
No, but I could ask Mr. Subero. He can elaborate on it. But at this time, we do not have such a standard operating procedure, sir.
So there's no recording of audio or visual medium as standard operating procedure when detainees are being interrogated in this country now?
Well, no, but remember, there'll be a situation where sometimes the person will be held immediately. Immediately on being held, the police officer will want to know where's your associate who just decided to run down on a track. So questions can actually take place even on the scene of the apprehension. You are speaking about when the person is now brought into a holding cell.
But you raise an important point here, Commissioner, because I would imagine that there still will be some standard best practice protocol, even in situations where detainees are in the custody of police officers. Transparency and accountability for the public.
Agreed, sir. Right. Corporal Fraser?
Yeah.
So this is not now being done?
I can answer that question. Interviews are usually recorded. They are recorded interviews.
What does usually mean?
I guess it all depends on the section of the department. For our department, there are video and audio recordings of interviews being done.
But you said usually, that suggests that it's optional. Is it optional or is it mandatory?
No, at the SIU, standard operating procedure, that interviews are recorded.
Is that across all divisions of the Police Service, Commissioner, or is that just at the SIU?
No, well, sir, to try to put, we have 77 stations. I said we have more stations than most countries in the world when you look at population. So to try to put that type of equipment in every single station when someone is held, again, there's a cost factor. I am trying for the most basic right now, which is the body cameras. So, and that is a drop in the bucket compared to proper recording of all persons in every single police station when held. I think what Corporal Fraser is alluding to is pertaining to the sensitivity or the type of crime. And that is where it is that there will be some, but there's no mandatory standard operational procedure that every single person, when questioned by the police, that it is that they are recorded.
Chairman, just to assist here, we just recently passed the evidence amendment bill, and that will make the recording of interviews mandatory.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And of course, the use of body cameras will treat with the situation as the commissioner described. The man is arrested and his colleague ran down the track. If the officer arresting him has a body cam and the vehicle has a camera on its dashboard, as happens in some countries, to relate to the question of best practice. And before that law that we passed on Friday, the evidence amendment bill, which will elucidate and elaborate the procedures that now exist, and where it now exists, as Corporal Fraser was saying, it will now become the law rather than the option to have been done. The old judges' rules and so on is what operated now, and the police had pocket diaries, so they suppose at the first and reasonable opportunity to record in their pocket diary what the gentleman said, and when they get to the station, they put that in the diary as well. But with the body cams and the technology now, and the new law that we passed on Friday, then that should answer those questions far more fully. Go ahead, please.
Just on record, Chairman, and this is not casting any aspersions on any police officer, but I much more prefer digital recordings. They're much more reliable.
Of course. This is understandable.
My question,
Mr. Commissioner?
Yes, sir.
Just as an extension to the matter raised by Mr. Richards in respect of this. So SWOT is a specialist section, is it?
Yes, sir. Similar to, so we have SWOT, we have the Special Operation Response Team, we have the Interagency Task Force, we have the Guard, we have the GB, and MOPS.
And how would the public identify a SWOT officer? Because I know I can identify a police officer in his blue and gray. I can now identify him in his gray and white and dark gray camouflage kit, which they assumed recently. I see the Guard and Emergency Branch officers using it. I have seen photographs of operations. How do I identify a member of SWOT? Are they authorized to wear balaclavas? How does the public identify a SWOT officer?
There is a patch that is on their right shoulder. So, and their uniform, there's a camouflage uniform that was approved that is different to the other units.
All right. Well, you know, the public, there was a time when the public benefited from seeing all of the uniforms of the police service. There was a time, in fact, I can picture a photograph now as an ex-policeman at the police training college on sports day or something. They had all of the uniforms of the police service in a line, mounted branch, everybody. You know, the older police will remember that. Do we still do that sort of thing so that these uniforms are known, especially when criminals are now? I saw some Facebook footage recently where a criminal was looking so much like a police officer in what he wore when he was arrested.
Yes, so we just got the approval for the change of uniform after several years, because the present uniform is not the appropriate uniform, especially in this type of weather, and also because of the things that we are putting on the police officers now, whereby what I have done is now it's for the first time ever, the police now we have a proper system for minimum use of force, where the uniform now it will have clips for the camera, the body camera. It will have the clips for the radio for communication. You will now then move to the belt, where the belt now will have pepper spray, tasers, and then the firearm. So it now gives the police officer that minimum use of force policy that he can use. That can only have happened if it is that we change the uniform. So the uniform itself is we got the approval from the cabinet just a week or so ago, and it will have, obviously, the police officer will now have his badge easily identifiable, so the person can actually have the number of that police officer.
As head of the police organization, some of the matters we broached here today reflect on, indeed, for example, the question of delays, the question of not having a file ready for the police prosecutor in the court, and therefore the matter had to be adjourned and adjourned and adjourned, and that pushed the magistrate in a place in the balancing of his right to bail with the balancing of the rights of the accused. And the magistrate in those circumstances, as you said earlier, is very likely to grant bail and so on when there are delays. I want to ask you, as the police leader, head of the police organization, in what ways, to what extent does laziness, sloppiness, unproductivity affect the efficiency and the effectiveness of the police service in your estimation? And what could be done to the extent that it exists to resolving it?
Well, because we have done proper case management now, that is why it is we would have seen, as I stated, over the last 2 years, a 93% reduction in police officers' non-appearance. There were no consequences. There was no follow-up. So police officers would, on many occasions, not actually attend court. That is no longer the case. So that is no, and I can't state, and I'm not going to elaborate on the investigation, but let me show you how far it goes to this committee. I have a report of an attorney who boasted that he paid a police officer not to attend court. And that is how serious this gets. So you pay the police officer not to attend court. We have now reached a point where you have rogue police officers deliberately being paid not to attend court. You have attorneys maybe doing the same thing. I have heard as well as warrants being issued and police officers deliberately not issuing the warrants. So we have a number of occasions now, because we have consequences. If the police officer takes this and he does not attend court, he is now going to be pulled in which is why what we have done to the 7%. So it is no longer based on laziness or incompetence. We now have consequences to ensure that police officers do not drop the ball at the most critical time, which is prior to the commencement of the case.
Yes. Yes. Members?
Mr. Chair, let me just ask on that particular point that the Commissioner of Police just made. So can we say now that that will not happen again? Because that is news to a lot of us who are not lawyers and who are on this committee, where we're now hearing that police officers are being paid in my layman's terms, obstruct justice in that way. Can we say now with that type of digitization that is ended, that won't happen again? Because you can now track what is taking place. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you know, before you answer, Commissioner, I owe it to this country to just say a little more on this matter, because, you know, I heard a member of parliament one day say, I was present when he said it, that he had to provide paper for police to make photocopy documents at a particular station. And in the context of Trinidad, that developed to a folklore where every police station didn't have a copier, every police station didn't have paper, and it's a perennial problem. I have seen that in this land of folklore. I think I understood the commissioner to say that he has a document where an allegation is made by a lawyer that he paid a policeman. So being paid and all of that and so on, so the public wouldn't go on that track. So the commissioner was making reference to a particular incident. Please, your question.
Yeah.
Well, no, Commissioner, you got it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you got the question. You got the question.
Yes, he got it. He got it.
All right. So yes. So I can't state that something will never take place. What I can give the assurance is because now we have consequences, and now that there's a deterrent, it will greatly minimize the possibility of that happening. And if it does happen, it means that that officer will now need to account for his absenteeism from court. And again, I am very pleased that the chairman made that statement, because the way this country is, they will say that all police officers are involved in such, but they wouldn't say that all attorneys are involved in paying the police officers. And that is very interesting. So the same way people will say that police officers are now doing it, you wouldn't say that all attorneys are doing it as well. It was one report of one attorney trying to bribe one police officer.
Chairman.
Mr. Scotland, feel free.
Commissioner and Chairman, I don't want to be too much longer with the Commissioner. Is it not that the government of Trinidad and Tobago, even in harsh economic times, is providing adequate and reasonable resources to the police service? Is that not a fair statement?
If I get zero budget, I will do the best I can without affecting the operational capability of the police.
All right. You asked not to. Are you getting zero budget?
No. Well.
Good. Commissioner, hear the question. It's you. You could say, no, is it not that the government now is giving the police service reasonable and adequate resources based on all the circumstances, the economic circumstances?
Okay. I am aware that this is not the time of milk and honey, and I know things are very difficult.
Thank you.
At this time, which is why I have to do as best as I can. At this time, we are indebted of $182 million to suppliers. I spend probably 1/4 of my day speaking to all of the suppliers for them not to pull the plug, whether it be repairs of vehicles, fuel, electricity, IT, equipment, or whatever. I can give you assurance that this has not affected the operational capability of the police service, because I've been liaising constantly with the suppliers not to pull the plug. Having said that, I know the Minister of Finance and National Security, they are doing all that they can, because, as I said, we are $182 billion in debt. And it is not.
Go on, and they're doing all that they can to finish your statement, Commissioner.
All that they can to assist us in providing the funds for the suppliers will not pull the plug on us. Some of these debts would have been from the last fiscal year, and it is not that the police spend more. We actually spent about $50 or $60 million less than the budget allocation for the last fiscal year. So we have reduced it, but the funds have not been approved and delivered to the police service for payment. But as I said, I want to stress that this has not affected the operational capability of the police service at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Commissioner?
Yes, Chairman.
On Friday last, we heard of a case from Mr. Scotland in the Parliament in a debate where the witness was kept for many, many hours in the custody of the police.
The accused.
The accused, yes. He was not given food. He was not given water. He was kept what was the time period?
7 days. The state versus Joseph Rez. That's the case, Mr. Commissioner.
Of course, ultimately, he gave a confession statement. And having so done, on the basis of that, the court felt that his will was sapped by the experience that he had. And as a consequence, the evidence in that confession statement, upon which the matter solely depended, was lost to the prosecution. That statement was deemed to be oppressively acquired. His energy, his will was sapped, and he gave the confession as a consequence of his will being sapped, and he started to say yes when he probably should be saying no. I know we have kept you here very long, Mr. Commissioner. We don't want to sap your will similarly. But I do have a question following on Mr. Scotland's. You see, because there was a time, and Mr. Scotland would know, when police said we didn't have vehicles. Mm-hmm. There was a time when they say we didn't have weapons. Yes. There was a time when we say the station was old and it was broken down and we couldn't function from in there. There was a time when they said they didn't have enough manpower. I think Mr. Scotland, and I know I can't speak for that articulate top-level advocate as he is, but I think what he was saying is that could it be truthfully said that the police are without some basic element, and by the way, he was implying as well that there are many, many, many police officers, some sitting right around you, Mr. Commissioner, who are adequately equipped with degrees from universities all over the world in all kinds of specialties. Persons who have acquired high-level qualification. And therefore, Mr. Scotland's question, as I'm now refining it, is whether it could be truthfully said that the police is without adequate resources to impact itself and impose rectitude on what is a largely lawless society using the law as it is supposed to. That's the question, Mr. Commissioner. Or is the police able to say, we don't have basic resources and therefore we can't function effectively? Please.
No, so I would not be in a position to say that. We have more vehicles. We have the vehicles that we require. We have the manpower strength. When you look at the number of police officers in this country compared to other countries in the world, what we are doing now is trying to make the police service more effective, more efficient. When I have 2,500 police officers guarding 77 stations, that will affect our effectiveness. So what we are doing now is trying to work smart, trying to utilize our resources in an effective and efficient manner. And by doing that, it will improve. So when it comes to equipment, vehicles, the buildings, we have it. Maintenance has always been a big issue. So the 182 million that we are in debt, hopefully that will be provided soon, but it has not affected us in any way. The one thing, however, may I quickly add, as you speak about the manpower strength, what the police service we were doing for years was bringing batches of 100 every 6 months. So you'll be bringing in 200 police officers every year, but then we'll be losing about 200 police officers every year based on retirement. So we have never been able to get to our established strength, which is why we have been 1,500 police officers short. I have found the system where we can increase it to 300. And by doing that, it means that within 2 years or 2 or 3 years, we will, the first time ever, the police service will have our full established strength. That requires just some bungalows next to the police training academy that is being used by other persons, and they are actually renting it obviously making it as a business. I have written to cabinet asking for the police to have control of that. With that, it will send our recruiting from 100 to 300, which means that every year we will now have over 400 increase in our strength. So in about 2 or 3 years, we will now have the full capacity.
Commissioner, Commissioner?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, Chairman.
I just would like to say, because it is now 1747, we've been here a long time.
Yes.
We don't, as I said, want to sap your energy and have you say things that you probably would want to withdraw. So listen, we would want to bring this meeting to a bit of a close. So whatever questions that I and my other committee members have, we assure you, we will reduce them, put them into writing, and we will make a request of you for your responses equally in writing. But before I close, insofar as the 185 million is concerned, are you there, Mr. Commissioner?
Yes, I am, Chairman.
There are large issues in Trinidad and Tobago about value for money, particularly when it involves the state as the beneficiary of some of those services offered. So I know, and this is general, not only about the police service, very often the state ends up owing 185 million, but it might have gotten far less in terms of goods and services because of a whole lot of circumstances. So this is something that we will have to bear in mind going forward. And secondly, on the question of manpower, we have to ensure, and you used the term efficiency a while ago, that every single police officer, when Andrea Barrett the other day was lost to her family in this country, we were having a pre-discussion, this very committee, and I told my colleagues, I felt on that day as though I would get every single police officer behind every desk, everywhere, in pursuit of those criminals and to find that child. So I'm making the point that every single man and woman of the police service of every rank, we have to try to get them to operate optimally at the highest levels of proficiency. Highest levels. And then we will know as a nation that that organization and all other organizations that serve this nation give us, in terms of that human resource, value for our money. So, Mr. Commissioner, on behalf of this committee, I would like to thank you and your team for appearing before us as we made that request of you. I would also like to thank Madam Johnson, P.S. Johnson, and Mr. Moses, who very ably represented the Office of the Prime Minister and caused this committee to understand far better what they do in the context of dealing with young people, identifying vulnerable people, youngsters, and directing them away from the clutches of those who want to recruit them into gangs in this country. Your day has been long. We appreciate your suggestions. Everything that we have said here today has been recorded. This is live television and radio. And we will, as I have said, formulate a few other questions that we have into writing and shall direct them to you in short order. And if we want elucidation on anything that was said today and some of the matters that you promised to direct statistics and answers to in writing to our committee members, we look forward to that with great anticipation. So again, we would like to thank you very profusely for your attendance. I would not, as I would usually do, invite closing remarks because you have had so much to say. So let me, if you don't mind and don't consider it discriminatory, let me ask P.S. Johnson if she has any closing remarks, and then we'll take it down. Madam Johnson?
Chairman, I have no further remarks. Thank you.
I thank you very warmly. Mr. Commissioner, since she has made the floor available to you in this, do you have any short closing comments on behalf of the police service?
Yeah, yes, so just 30 seconds. As you all spoke about the concerns of the police with the shortcomings, I give the assurance to the country it has not affected the police service in any way. The officers who are here to protect and serve with pride, they continue to be highly motivated. There's a very high degree of morale. There's a strong degree of passion and love for the officers to do what is required. And you would see very shortly, we actually did a poll And whereas before, about 5 years ago, there was a 14% odd national support and belief in the police service, we have just done a scientific poll with a 3% margin of error. It has now gone to over 50%. I think it's one of the highest we have seen in the history of this country in the trust and confidence in the police service. And that is not just because of the public willing to give us a chance, but it's because of the change in the maturity and the police officers and the police service in doing what is required to serve this country with pride.
Well, if that be so, then I must, and in anticipation, congratulate the police service. But I must tell you, as a representative of the people, and from the soundings we get, the country is not satisfied that the criminal justice system is working to best quality and to their advantage. There have been a hue and cry within the last few hours in this country along those lines. And therefore, if the police is operating as you have said, then as we bring more of the stakeholders before us, we might very well find where the biggest bugbear or bugbears are. But I can tell you, the public is not altogether satisfied with the way this state responds to and protects them from those who harm us and recruit our vulnerable youth into criminal gangs and therefore criminal activity. Thank you all very much. Travel safely back to your respective workstations, and let me suspend this meeting to facilitate your departure. Thank you very kindly from this room. Thank you. Good afternoon.